Congressman, so your state obviously is in focus to follow up on Robert's reporting there ahead of the president's speech next hour. What would you say about deploying not only the National Guard but active duty Marines in California? You think it's the right move?
I think it's justified. You know, the doctrine of nullification died with the Confederacy. States are not permitted to obstruct the enforcement of federal law. And the president has a solemn duty to enforce federal law and to suppress rebellion, and that's what he's doing. I mean, people can see the videos. These are not peaceful protests. They are violent riots in defiance of federal law. And the Democrats have made it clear they won't oppose them. And indeed, the Democrats are not stopping the rioters. If the Democrats have their way, I'm afraid our communities, all of them, will be at the mercy of these violent mobs, while criminals who are illegally in this country are allowed to continue to prey on all of us. I think Lincoln said it best. There's no grievance that is a fit object for redress by mob law, and that's as true today as it was in his day.
What would you say to those who argue, and Mayor said this, others have said it, Democratic members of Congress have said it, that yeah, it was tense on Friday, but deploying the military has actually made it more tense. It's escalated the situation. This is Congressman Jimmy Gomez making comments to that effect a little bit earlier. Let me play a quick clip. Here it is.
In a democracy, civil disobedience isn't met with military force. But that's exactly what Trump is doing. He's inciting a situation that could get worse if people do not bring down the tension. And the way he can bring down the tension is by withdrawing the National Guard and the U.S. military.
Your response that this is just an escalation?
Well, we tried that during the George Floyd riots, and the result was more than $1 billion of damage and 19 people dead. This action was made necessary when ICE agents attempted to execute court-ordered warrants on criminal illegal aliens. Now, when a mob intervened, ICE called for local law enforcement. Local law enforcement didn't respond. LAPD officers have said they were told to stand down by the mayor's office. Well, that creates a state of insurrection that requires federal force. As I said, we saw that during the George Floyd riots, what happens when leftist officials refuse to counter violent mobs.
I guess the other thing's cost, right? Because that came out today. Hegseth, the defense secretary, testifying on Capitol Hill. On the tablet, guys, you can pop it up. The number that's been thrown around now and confirmed by the Pentagon, $134 million to deploy the Marines and the National Guard out in L.A. And then, you know, some would add on the cost of this military parade, and then you're getting up, you know, closer to $200 million. Justify the cost?
Yeah, let me add up the costs of the George Floyd riots when left-wing mayors refused to intervene. American cities aflame, billions of dollars of damages, and 19 people killed. That's a terrible butcher's bill that the president has stopped with this action.
What about in this speech today? So the president, we'll see him at Fort Bragg. He'll I think he's getting a tour. He'll be reviewing some of the equipment of the troops there before he speaks. But we think he'll speak in an hour or so, or maybe a little less than that. What's the message? You know, is this all about the 250th birthday of the Army, and that's the head of the parade on Saturday? Does he get into what we're seeing in California? What's the message you think the president wants to deliver this afternoon?
Well, I can't read his mind, but I'll tell you what I'd advise him to say. First of all, remind people that the left is demanding that he stop enforcing court-ordered warrants to arrest criminal aliens who are illegally in this country. And that would allow convicted murderers and rapists and child molesters and drug dealers and thieves to continue to prey on our communities as they did under the Biden administration. I'd also point out that, you know, in a sense, this is the second nullification crisis. The first one was in 1832. That's when South Carolina obstructed the enforcement of federal tariffs. Andrew Jackson threatened to personally march down there and hang the first insurrectionist he encountered from the first tree he could find, and that ended the crisis. This time, all Donald Trump has done is send in the Marines.
Yeah, one question on politics before we go. So this issue, just broadly speaking, immigration has always been a very strong issue for the president. I'm sure he thinks it still is. I'm sure he thinks the political dynamic here is in his favor. I would say this. This is on our tablet now. On the polling that was done, this particular poll about the National Guard deployment, approval only at 38%, disapproval 45%. So even if people are in favor of the president on this issue, the how and going about it and using the military seems to be raising some questions. What would you say to that?
Well, I think the only sensible Democrat in Washington seems to be John Fetterman, who said, quote, "My party loses the moral high ground when we refuse to condemn setting cars on fire, destroying buildings, and assaulting law enforcement." And to that, I say amen. Unfortunately for Senator Fetterman, he seems to be a lonely voice in a party that's completely lost its mind. And I think you'll see the polling reflect that in the days ahead.
Okay, I did see those comments. Very interesting from Fetterman. We'll talk more about him later in the show. Thank you, Congressman. Thanks for coming on with us. Congressman Tom McClintock with us from California.